Senator Cruz, welcome to the Northwest and welcome to the Michael Medved Show.
Michael, thank you very much. It's great to be with you, and it's great to be up in the Pacific Northwest.
Well, great to talk to you, and congratulations on all of the recent successes of the campaign. In that spirit, I just want to ask you about some of the difficulties that Democrats have been having with their campaigns. Both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, when he visited the Northwest, have had all kinds of problems responding to challenges from the Black Lives Matter movement. You probably saw that Senator Sanders, your colleague in the U.S. Senate, actually had to cancel a rally because two people had occupied the podium. I suspect that you would handle the situation somewhat differently from the way either Senator Sanders or Secretary Clinton did. How would you handle it if you were challenged by demonstrators from Black Lives Matter?
That is a fair inference. You know, I have to say, watching Bernie Sanders quietly and meekly hand over the podium, it was certainly not an exchange that engendered any confidence about this person as commander-in-chief. If one is unable to stand up to a protester, it's difficult to see how one could stand up to Putin or any other tyrant across the face of the globe. You know, when it comes to dealing with protesters, I've always found the best way to do so is straightforwardly and directly. And indeed, not too many weeks ago, I was at a rally outside the White House for the 4 hostages that have been abandoned in Iran by this catastrophic Iranian nuclear deal. And a number of Code Pink protesters showed up and tried to shout me down. And rather than allow them to shut the process down, I actually invited the Code Pink protesters to come up. I said, listen, civil discourse under the First Amendment requires we have a discussion, so come on up here and let's have a discussion. I think they were fairly astonished at that. And I allowed them to present their views on why this Iranian deal was not catastrophic. And we had about a 25-minute substantive debate in front of the TV cameras that focused on the facts and substance. And it's interesting, folks who were otherwise inclined to scream and disrupt found themselves, I think, somewhat startled to be in the realm of civil discourse where substance actually matters.
I remember seeing the video of that exchange, and I think you handled it extraordinarily effectively. What about the substance of the challenge from the Black Lives Matter people? The idea that the fundamental problem for the black community right now is white racism. Do you think that's a correct designation?
The statement Black Lives Matter, of course that is true. And there is reason for the African American community to be very unhappy at the state of pervasive crime and poverty of many urban environments. Now, it's worth noting that virtually every major city in the country has been in the exclusive control of the Democratic Party for decades. And so, for good reason, they are protesting Hillary Clinton, and for good reason they're protesting Bernie Sanders. Now, I don't know that the activists necessarily realize that it is the progressive leftist policies that have done so much damage in minority communities, in African American communities, in Hispanic communities. And what we should be doing instead is seeking to create an environment where every child has access to an excellent education. It's one of the reasons I'm such a passionate advocate of school choice. I think school choice is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. And if you saw urban kids with access consistently to quality education, you'd have markedly different opportunity. And yet it is Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and the modern Democratic Party that blocks the African American and Hispanic community from having access to choice.
We're speaking with Senator Ted Cruz on various subjects involving the presidential campaign. Of course, the subject at the moment, inspiring great controversy, appears to be the immigration plan put on the table by your competitor for the nomination, Republican nomination, Donald Trump. Your general reaction to the Trump immigration plan? Do you support it?
The response to Donald Trump is that I'm glad he's in the race, and he manages to attract a lot of attention, and actually to force the media to talk about issues that the media should have been talking about, in particular illegal immigration. I welcome Donald Trump's immigration proposal. Virtually every element in the proposal that he submitted is contained within legislation that I filed years ago in the United States Senate that I've been fighting to do. I'm very glad to see, for example, that he proposed tripling the Border Patrol. That's something I campaigned on when I ran for Senate. It's legislation I filed in the Senate and have fought for. Have also filed legislation to increase fourfold the fixed-wing and rotary-wing air assets, to put in place a strong biometric exit-entry system on visas, to put in place a strong E-Verify system so people here illegally cannot get employment lawfully, to defund sanctuary cities. All of these are elements that I have advocated for, have fought for. Indeed, I understand that Donald Trump sought some advice from my colleague in the Senate, Jeff Sessions, who's a good friend of mine. Jeff and I have fought for many of these legislative proposals side by side, and I welcome anyone in the presidential race who is shining a light on these serious problems and forcing the mainstream media to talk about issues they don't want to talk about, namely the enormous security threat posed by illegal immigration and the enormous downward pressure on wages and employment that unrestrained illegal immigration is providing.
Well, I think that most of the Republican candidates, virtually all, would support those elements of the Trump plan that you just endorsed, Senator, and that you're right. Obviously, you've been fighting for a long time. What about the most controversial element of his plan, which is getting rid of birthright citizenship, saying to children who are born here in the United States of parents who are here illegally, you can't become American citizens? Would you support a change in the 14th Amendment if necessary to achieve that?
Absolutely. We should end granting automatic birthright citizenship to the children of those who are here illegally.
Do you think there's a realistic chance to change the Constitution on this?
I think it is possible, but any constitutional amendment by its nature is difficult to achieve. I would note that has been my position from my very first days running for the Senate. I was advocating for this back in 2011. And so I welcome Donald Trump articulating this view. It's a view I have long held. And you look at our current system, it doesn't make any sense right now, because what it does is incentivizes people breaking the law and coming here illegally. And indeed, that, I think, is much of the purpose of President Obama's illegal and unconstitutional executive amnesty.
And how to defeat that executive amnesty is another section, another topic that we will discuss with Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, presidential candidate. We'll be right back with the one, the only Ted Cruz. Senator, there's so many issues to cover, and there are issues in which you've taken strong stands, and of course you defend those stands. One of the issues that Hillary Clinton is going to make a big focus of her campaign has to do with the financing of presidential campaigns. You've surprised a lot of people by raising a huge amount of money, much of it in large donations, particularly for your super PAC. Do you agree with Hillary Clinton that we need a radical change in the way that campaigns are financed?
Of course, Hillary is wrong, and it shows just how radical and extreme she is, that she is proposing amending the Bill of Rights to take out the protections of free speech in the First Amendment. And indeed, her fellow Democrats in this prior Congress introduced a constitutional amendment to strip away the free speech protections that you and I enjoy. I led the fight in the Senate against it, and it is, I believe in free speech in the First Amendment. And this is yet another example of big government liberals that want to silence the citizenry so that they can have more power. And this is a good example, Michael, just like the last topic of immigration, where you will see candidates in the Republican field who talk about illegal immigration, who talk about the First Amendment. I think that Republican voters are tired of what I call campaign conservatives, people who discover conservative principles when they happen to be running for president. I think people are much more interested in consistent conservatives, someone who's been the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So back in 2013, when Barack Obama and Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer and a whole bunch of establishment Republicans were pushing for amnesty, I led the fight against amnesty. You know, it's striking. Of the 10 Republicans that were on that debate stage in Cleveland, virtually none of them stood with me and Jeff Sessions fighting against amnesty. Likewise, on the First Amendment, what you just asked, when the Democrats tried to amend the Bill of Rights to take away our free speech protection, I led the fight to protect our liberty, and virtually none of the Republicans standing on the stage in Cleveland uttered a peep or showed up to defend our liberties.
Do you have coming up a rally in support of religious liberty? What needs to be done in your opinion to protect the religious liberties of American citizens?
Right. Well, as you know, Michael, religious liberty has been a deep passion of mine for many, many decades. Indeed, for 2 decades, the fight for religious liberty nationally. When I was the Solicitor General of Texas, we defended the Ten Commandments monument on the state capitol grounds, went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and won 5-4. We defended the Pledge of Allegiance, the words, "One nation under God," went to the Supreme Court, won unanimously. And in private practice, I was very proud to defend the constitutionality of the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial. I represented over 3 million veterans pro bono for free.
Yeah, I remember the federal government was terribly concerned, as were the ACLU, that cross in the middle of the desert would somehow offend all the tortoises and hares that were romping around in the Mojave Desert.
You're exactly right, and the ACLU sued, and the federal court ordered that 70-year-old monument to our soldiers who gave their lives in World War I had to be torn down. And it was a horrific decision, and I represented 3 million veterans before the Supreme Court defending that Veterans Memorial, and we won 5-4. So when it comes to this issue of religious liberty, it is the foundational liberty, it is the first right protected in the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights, and it has never been more under assault than it is right now. And so this Friday in Iowa, we are having a religious liberty rally where we will have thousands coming together to honor the heroes across this country who have stood up and defended their faith and have faced government persecution. Whether this is chaplains in the military, up in Alaska, an Air Force chaplain posted on his blog that there are no atheists in foxholes, and he was reprimanded by his supervising officer. I mean, you almost can't make fun of this, Michael. It is so divorced from where we are as our history and a people. And by the way, the origin of that phrase, "there are no atheists in foxholes," came from an historic speech that President Dwight D. Eisenhower gave to the American Legion in 1954.
Okay, we will be right back with Senator Ted Cruz talking a little bit about foreign policy and some good news yesterday for those of us who want to defeat this terrible deal with Iran. Right back with presidential candidate Ted Cruz.
Choice in Senior Home Care assists senior citizens and adults to continue living at home and not have to move into a nursing home. Visiting Angels has over 400 franchised locations across the nation. Experienced, compassionate caregivers provide assistance in hygiene, meal preparation, and light housework up to 24 hours a day. Rates are affordable, and you can select your caregiver before service begins. Visiting Angels has cared for hundreds of thousands of seniors nationwide. Franchises are available. Call Visiting Angels toll-free today at 877-374-LIVE. To find an office near you, visit www.visitingangels.com. For home care for your loved ones, call Visiting Angels now at 877-374-LIVE. That's Visiting Angels, America's choice in home care at 877-374-LIVE.
It is 44 minutes after the hour on the Michael Medved Show with Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, presidential candidate whose campaign has been gaining a lot of momentum and a lot of support around the country. Senator, right now, your day job is also very, very important. Your job as a senator from the state of Texas. You are one of the senators who's been most outspoken against this horrible deal with Iran, and I salute you for that. Yesterday, Bob Menendez, who's the ranking Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, announced that he was joining Chuck Schumer and others against this deal. Your colleague Jeff Flake of Arizona, who had been on the other side, is also now opposed to it. Things seem to be moving in the right direction. Is there any chance, as you read the Senate, that you could get the 67 votes you would need to override the president's expected veto and to actually scuttle this terrible deal?
Well, I very much hope so. As you noted, Michael, this deal is catastrophic. The consequences, I think this deal poses the single greatest national security threat facing America today. And if the deal goes through, there are three consequences. Number one, the Obama administration will become the world's leading financier of radical Islamic terrorism, as billions of dollars will go directly to Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and Islamic terrorists across the world, who will use those billions to murder Americans, to murder Israelis, to murder Europeans. Secondly, this deal abandons 4 American hostages in Iran. And thirdly, this deal only accelerates Iran acquiring. Sad to see Chuck Schumer and Bob Menendez coming out publicly against it. I salute them and sing their praises, which is not something I do every day regarding Democrats.
That's true.
But when they do the right thing, I'm happy to do it every day for 100 days in a row if they keep doing the right thing. and as you know, Michael, you and I have talked about this before. There used to be a long tradition of Scoop Jackson Democrats, of Joe Lieberman Democrats, of John F. Kennedy Democrats, who were willing to defend national security and put that above partisan allegiances. And I hope we see the reemergence of Joe Lieberman and Scoop Jackson and John F. Kennedy Democrats. Chuck Schumer did a courageous thing, and he's paying a price for it in his party. I hope a number of other Democrats decide their responsibility to protect our national security, to stand with our friend and ally, the nation of Israel, and to protect the lives of millions of Americans is far more important than any partisan loyalty they might owe to the Obama White House. It will take a remarkable thing to defeat this terrible deal in Congress, because it will take a number of Democrats being willing to break with their party. But on my end, I'm doing everything humanly possible to energize and mobilize the American people to call on their elected officials to do exactly that.
One of the things that we're seeing with this deal is the need to at least find some members of the other party to work with. And that brings me to one of the big challenges against your campaign. Folks say that a successful president of the United States needs to be able to work with Congress, and that means working with the opposition in Congress as well as with your own party. You've had a tough time even working with your own party leadership in the Senate of the United States. A lot of people love you for it. What do you say about your ability as president to actually assemble coalitions and work, if necessary, across the aisle?
Well, Michael, I think what is critical is that we actually solve the real problems facing this country. I think our country is in crisis. We're bankrupting our kids and grandkids. Our constitutional rights are under assault. And America has receded from leadership in the world. And, as you know, about a month ago, I came out with a new book called A Time for Truth, where I detail what is happening in Washington, and in particular, what I call the Washington cartel. And the Washington cartel I describe as career politicians get in bed with lobbyists and special interests and grow government. The premise of your question is that the American people are looking for someone to go to Washington and essentially go along to get along, to keep the current direction of Washington going the same way.
No, that's not the premise of my question. The premise of my question is that the American people are looking for a president who can actually get things done.
Absolutely, but how do you get things done? There is the Washington way, which is you cut deals and grow government and enhance the power of Washington at the expense of citizens.
So what's the other way?
Or what you can do. The other way is to break the Washington cartel, and the model I will point to is 1980 and before. But if you think about it, in 78, 79, Reagan didn't go to Washington and sit down with the old bulls of the Senate and the House and try to convince Republicans, come on, guys, you got to stand for something. Remember, Reagan had primaried Gerald Ford in 76. You
Sure.
want to tick off Republican leadership come within an inch of toppling the incumbent Republican president in primary.
Yeah, but when Reagan was president, Senator, with all due respect, and I was very involved in the Republican Party at this time. Reagan worked with Dan Rostenkowski on tax reform. He worked with Bill Bradley. He worked with Tip O'Neill because the Democrats controlled the House of Representatives. Reagan would have accomplished nothing if he hadn't gotten the Democrats who controlled the House to go along with his tax cuts.
And of course that is right, but the way he got the Democrats to go along is Reagan first took the case to the American people. The people rose up in such overwhelming numbers that then elected politicians in Washington wanting to keep their jobs were willing to work with him. He didn't do the current Washington way of working with Harry Reid by surrendering on everything. He stood for principle and went to the American people. Now,
Agreed.
I would note in my time in Congress, I've worked with a great many, actually, Democrats to get things done. When Iran named as their ambassador to the United Nations to bar Abu Dhabi and other known terrorists from coming to America, it passed the Senate 100-0. It passed the House of Representatives 435-0, and President Obama signed it into law. I worked with Bob Menendez, who you just mentioned, to pass legislation for the State Department, provide a $5 million reward for information leading to the capture of terrorists who had kidnapped 3 Israeli teenagers. That passed the Senate unanimously, and then thankfully we captured the terrorist, or Israel did, before the House could take it up. So I'm perfectly happy to work with anybody if we are solving the real problems. The problem, Michael, is there are far too many people in Washington, particularly Republicans, whose first option is surrender your principles and grow government.
And that's not Ted Cruz. Appreciate your time, Senator. I know you have to run.